All right, welcome back to another episode of the No Matter What Club. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome a longtime friend of mine, Wesley Detwiler. Wesley is a PhD clinical psychologist in Palm Springs who specializes in providing psychological services to the LGBT community. He has extensive experience working with individuals struggling with mental health and addiction diagnosis, combining evidence-based therapies such as EMDR and brain spotting to help his clients regulate their emotions, resolve traumas, and increase self-awareness. Also of important note, Wesley has provided clinical consultation and psychological assessments for gender-diverse clients seeking gender-confirming surgery. Wesley's experience and journey is going to make for great conversation today. We are so excited to have him. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the No Matter What Club. We are so excited today to have our sidekicks, Mell and Jack with No Matter What Recovery, and then our special guest, Mr. Wes Detwiler, a clinical psychologist based in Palm Springs, California, who is also a really, we're both class of 2015, which is great. It's so funny how our lives have paralleled. Wes and I were bathhouse Barbies at the same time, and we met at a play. I was going to say the name, but I'm not going to say the name. We met at a
very well-known establishment,
a spa, in San Diego, and he was on one side of the hall hustling, and I was on the other side of the hall hustling, and we would come out and wave to each other, and then we ran into each other in the rooms, and now professionally our paths have crossed. And so welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about you and your story, and then how you got to become a clinical psychologist, and what's up?
Thank you. So it's been truly a pleasure to kind of have this journey with you. And when I first got sober, they told me, you look around the room, 8 of you are not going to make it, right? And so I feel like you and I are so blessed to be kind of we both continue to year after year have birthdays around the same time, and totally. I'm in awe of kind of what you've accomplished in your life. And for me, it becoming, finally achieving or becoming the clinical psychologist that I always wanted to become has been a journey as well. So
one of the commonalities that I think both you and I share is that we both were in the distribution of substances, and it's so crazy to go from like being in like the deepest, darkest shadows of our life to now being in the light and helping individuals.
It's so funny that you say that. When I think about where I started in terms of, or where I ended up, I defended my PhD in 2007 as a clinical psychologist, and as a dual PhD. So I did the work in industrial organizational psychology and clinical psychology, and achieved a dual PhD, which everybody thought was crazy at the time. And if I'm honest, I pursued that degree mostly because I couldn't decide what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do this for, kick that can down the road. And then I did my residency in Miami at a lockdown treatment facility for adolescent boys and girls. And after that was such a difficult placement. There was a lot of beautiful things about it. I learned a lot, but it was also really taxing. And then going into foster care in Florida and working with foster care children.
Can I ask, one thing about Florida, I can't remember what it's called. So we have something here in mental health that's called a 5150, or it's
Baker
like a
Act.
psych hold.
Yeah.
What's it called in Florida?
Baker Act.
Baker Act. And what is that?
A Baker Act is the same as a 5150. So when
much longer, yes.
Well, it can be.
Yeah.
I think it has the same. I think a Baker Act is similar to 5150 in terms of time, but in Florida, and I think they have these here too. You can put kids in these lockdown treatment facilities that are not. It's behavioral health, right? It wasn't drug treatment, and they were under 18, and.
Well, I think the Baker Act, though, which is, I find it as an interesting parallel. I don't know if you've heard about this, but you can do the Baker Act for substance abuse in Florida, but you can't do a 5150 for or a psych hold for substance use disorder?
I don't know. I think they're like they're interchangeable. So like a 5150 is sort of the colloquial term for the Baker Act. Like it's like CFR 42 5150 section B, the Baker Act. And then you can go into a 5250, which is, I think, 10 to 14 days.
It's like the after the 3-day hold, then you can be held for an additional amount of time.
Yeah.
But I do believe you're correct that I don't think you do 5150s or any of those for substance use.
Correct.
No, for mental health.
Only
just for
mental health. Sorry to go on that tangent, but I find it as an interesting parallel between like Florida and California, because we deal with that a lot within our, like when we're dealing with families and they refer to the Baker Act. And I had to do some research on figuring out what it was.
What is the Baker Act?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was in Miami, and I just slowly kind of got off track. I slowly fell back into methamphetamine use, and Miami was like a playground. I mean, you've been to Miami, South Beach. I mean, it was just so much fun.
What year was that?
This was in 2010, 2011, and I started to. I started to feel like I was finally living my life, and I started to feel like I was finally, I was doing all the cool things. I was, feeling myself and all that fun stuff, and
Circuit parties.
Circuit parties. I knew all the doormen in South Beach. I could go anywhere. If somebody came into town, I could take them. We could have a good time. And I kind of fell into a really, a drug crowd, right? So, but I fell into, as you brought up, distribution. I didn't mean to. I had a friend that was a drug dealer. Like he was the one that was kind of supplying everybody, and he knew I had friends in San Diego, and it just asked me to put him in contact with some certain people, and that turned into, I don't want to say too much, but it turned into a situation where for about 8 months, it was just, taking in lives and spitting out money. And it was an insane kind of roller coaster that just occurred over time. And I think during that time, and all the time, I think I was using and kind of maybe even selling or hooking people up. I felt like I was helping people, right? I always felt this was sick. This is totally sick, right? But like, I felt that I was, if they weren't getting it from me, they might be getting it from somebody that would either screw them over or hurt them or put them in danger or whatnot. So
I had that same.
I did all the rationalizations as well. I was like, oh, they're sick, I'm helping them. Like,
right. And I'll give them a good deal. I won't cheat them. And, and I'm a good guy. I'm one of the good ones,
right. I know it's pure. Like, come on.
For a while before I started using it intravenously, I was like, oh, if you're using intravenously, I'm not going to sell to you because I don't want to.
I always had drug dealers with weird like moral codes, like you can't smoke these pills, like
But I think I always loved talking with people. I always loved getting into their story and kind of understanding where they were coming from. I remember that about you.
I think we had some very just long conversations.
Yeah. I used to call it, this is so funny, I just remembered this, but I used to call it guerrilla psychology, because imagine, like, here I am, I have a PhD already, right? I was the perfect poster child for like leveraging my potential, but never having anything to show for it. So, hey, I have a PhD in psychology. Like, what does that mean when you haven't done anything with it, right? Yeah. Like, you're constantly living up to this expectation that you're supposed to be something that you're not. I was constantly living up to this expectation that I was supposed to be something that I wasn't. And what I was somebody that I didn't care for. I just didn't like myself at all. But trying to help people, they come in, we talk for a while. It was a crazy life. I moved from, there's a whole story about why I left Miami. But I left Miami and came to San Diego, and it took me 4 months to go from Miami to San Diego. I call it my bathhouse tour. And I won't get into that.
New Orleans, Dallas.
Yeah.
Houston. Houston was bad because it was on the way to Mexico.
Well, then Austin.
Tour here.
Austin for a minute. Yeah. That was fun. Yeah.
But Dallas, they have two across the street from each other.
Yeah, Dallas was fun, but Houston I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
But what I really loved about, and in New Orleans too,
Yeah.
that closed down.
On
But
Toulouse.
what I really have always loved about bathhouses is that I've always felt that they're the center of our gay community in so many ways. And so sure, it's a place to go do drugs, and sure, it's a place to do all these nefarious things, but it was also a place to find community. And I really do feel like that's what I found when the whole time I was using meth was community. That's what I was seeking. That's what I really wanted. I wanted a place that I could go and nobody would judge me. I could show up in a towel and everybody's the same. Everyone, there's nobody that's
It's the
better
great
than the other.
equalizer in those situations in a lot of ways for a lot of people.
Well, people also talk about that with like nightclubs too, right? Like that's why the Pulse shooting was so impactful, was because it felt like this place that everybody could always go and feel safe for decades, and now that it had been infiltrated finally, right?
Such a violation.
Yeah.
Such a violation. Yeah. But yeah, so that 4 months was, I had a saying, always tomorrow, never today. I always one more bag. It was always one more, like, I'll quit tomorrow. I'll quit tomorrow.
It's such a long time when you're high to get somewhere.
Yeah. Waiting for a meth addict to get anywhere is miserable.
Right.
Well, I also didn't think I could. I was wondering if I was ever going to be able to get sober, right? Like I wasn't sure if that was in the cards for me. Especially as I came to California, and in like 2012, I think I came to California. I went to a treatment center. I won't say the treatment center's name, but it wasn't a 12-step program. Had great food. But I basically got out and was using again very shortly thereafter. And so I started to feel like, well, this getting sober is just not in the cards for me. And I kept doing this, like, dance, right? It's like a waltz, right? It's beautiful. Totally like a dance of, maybe a deal here or just these things that would get me by. And people would say that I was a functional, addict. And I always thought that was funny, because if I was a functional addict, why is it when I look in the mirror, I hate who I am? I just constantly hate who I am. So that didn't feel very functional to me, but I didn't know how to change it. I think a lot of us have this experience of just kind of hitting rock bottom. And this is a kind of a funny thing, but it was a confluence of so many things that led up to my sobriety. But one of them that always stands out is I had a friend that, for whatever reason, said he was a medium, and I'm not saying he was or wasn't. That's not for me to say. But he told me very clearly that the person that he channels told him that I will be dead in 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't like if you don't get sober. It was because I will be dead in 6 months because I didn't get sober.
Right.
And that scared me. Like I couldn't unhear that,
So it's that I'm looking in the mirror, I don't like who I am, but there's a part of me that wants to change, like a small part, and that glimmer of hope, because I relate to that. Like,
absolutely.
In my, I had bouts of sobriety before, and there was a part of me that always knew that I would make it back to the rooms. And I always say, I'm so glad fentanyl wasn't a thing for me when I was using, because if it was, I don't know that I would have ever made it back. But there was always that glimmer, like I always knew every run that I could turn back to the rooms.
It's just this tiny idea that something else might be possible.
Yeah.
Just the smallest idea.
Yeah, absolutely. While I say that I didn't think I could get sober, I also thought, gosh, if I ever can be a psychologist one day, I hope I can. It'll be after I get sober, and I hope I can help people get sober. But I was like, I don't. The space between where I was at and that almost seemed like impossible. But so, and I think it was in 2015, I was invited to go to Burning Man, and I was like, that sounded great. And there were so many different things that needed to happen in order for me to get to go to Burning Man. For me, Burning Man represented this place that was a place where people go for spiritual enlightenment, for growth, for learning, for fun. It's like I had this conception that it was whatever you made it. And so I went with this person. I remember writing in the journal at the time, my journal at the time, a journal that was completely blank except for this one statement, because I was going to write in it all the time, right? But I remember writing, I hope I learn what it is I want to learn, and I hope I find what it is I'm looking for. And that's what I wrote. And then I never wrote anything in after that. Burning Man was great. It was an amazing experience, and it was a horrible experience. It was, my bikes were stolen. The person I was there with, we'd gotten a really horrible fight. I was ridiculed and demeaned. All of these beautiful and horrible things happened at the same time. And towards the end, I hope it's okay to say that I used a psychedelic. Is that okay for me to say? So I used a psychedelic. It was just before the burn. Everybody that was there dropped some acid. I had never really dropped acid before. And I'm not recommending people do this at all, right? This is my story. But I dropped acid, and I had this journey where I was by myself walking around Burning Man, walking around the playa at night. And I was this child looking at the man I had become, and I was disgusted with myself. And I could no longer lie to myself about the choices that I had been making in my life, about how close I was to possibly getting arrested or whatever, the danger I was putting myself in, the pain I was causing my family, all of the lost time, and just all of it was just coming down on me. And I was just walking around just like crying and sobbing, and just disgusted with myself, really. So you could say it was a bad trip. You could say it was a good trip. The next day I was inconsolable, and I just was just crying the whole day. I couldn't. Something had really shifted in me. That we went through the burn, and the burn was beautiful. Basically, we got back. That was a Sunday. Monday, I met a friend of mine, my ex, Scott Tambling, and thankfully, the universe put Scott into my path because he was a trick, scruff, right? Like I was gonna swing by his house on the way home from Palm Springs back to San Diego. And I was just going to swing by and give him a kiss, because we had never met. And I ended up spending the night, and he 12-stepped me. He told me about the program. He told me about, what 12 steps are, the community, the fellowship. I had never experienced that before. And he helped me to make a phone call to a treatment center. Side note, my dad had gotten sober 6 months before off of alcohol. Oh, wow. So he gave me the card to a treatment center that I won't name, and to a person that was there, and said, when you're ready to get sober, reach out to this person. So he helped me to make that phone call. And so a week later, the following Friday, I was in treatment. And that was the beginning. That was September 18th of 2015.
Every time you tell me your date, it's so crazy because I'm October 7th, 2015. Like we got so with it, and we every year we celebrate, we do our post on social media, and we realize that we're 2.5 weeks apart. It's so crazy.
It's so fun.
What I love about when you tell your story is you're like, it was beautiful and terrifying. It was beautiful and horrific. I think that's a really shared experience of people, but I love the way that you frame things. It's not all good. It's not all bad. It really imbues things with a reason and a purpose. I went through this for a purpose, which ultimately, if we go the 12-step route, it's to be of service to other people.
Thank you for that. I absolutely, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. So what you just said is so true, that as little did I know that the path in front of me was this path of unity, fellowship, and service. And so
it's always amazing to me, the people who are put in our path at just the right time.
Absolutely.
The timing is everything, especially when you're at a bottom and you're maybe thinking about something different. And then all of a sudden someone just walks through the door that shifts the entire trajectory of your life.
And then, right? Yeah. I think that, we have to be willing, open, honest, and willing to step through those doors when they're open.
That's right. Not everyone takes a yes.
Not everyone does.
Yeah.
Not everyone does, and that is an unfortunate thing. But I feel like those doors will open again, hopefully for them if they can, persevere.
I think there were several windows that and throughout my journey that I wasn't ready. And if I'm looking back, I could have had those moments, I mean, my mom would cry on the phone to me throughout my time of getting high. And for whatever reason, the last time it stuck.
Yeah.
I had heard my mom cry hundreds of times, and it didn't affect me the way that it did the day that I decided to change my life. Maybe it was the fact that I had a staph infection at the same time. Maybe it was the fact that I was out of drugs and out of money. Whatever it was, the stars aligned that day, and it got me to a place of, okay, it's time.
It's like that you hear it, but then there's the moment that you listen.
Yep.
And those are two completely different things, because I heard a lot of things, but it wasn't until I was an active participant in the listening that I started to see a path forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't even imagine what it was. I think it was just after Burning Man and finally being ready to, commit myself. And my heart is racing right now because I'm talking about these things, and to kind of put myself back there is overwhelming. But I do recall still wondering, like, oh, maybe 30 days of not using drugs will be good for me, but I don't think that it's gonna really have an impact. But we'll see. We're just gonna go for it. Right? Why not? And I had to put all of my stuff in storage. I had a friend that packed up my apartment for me. I had all these people that wanted to support me. And so off we went, right? I remember there was about, I'm not going to go into that. There was, I'll just say this. They found some things in my bag that shouldn't have been there. And
when you were checking into treatment?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were left over from Burning Man. And I was mortified. How dare they accuse me of doing heroin? I've never done heroin. I would never, right? Like I was such a piece of work. But it was about 5 days in. I remember clearly that I was in a group, and I had this lump in my throat. I think all of us can relate to this, where I think during the time I was using, I felt like I had this sea of pain, this reservoir of pain that was just always present. And I felt like I had to keep going. I had to keep using. I had to stay high, because every time I slowed down for long enough, I would sink into this reservoir. And it was just always there. And I remember this about 5th day into my recovery journey, sitting in this group, and it was right here. And I just realized in this moment that I never have to use again. If I can, what these people are telling me is that I never have to feel this way again. And I just started crying. Like I just became just overwhelmed with just this pouring out of emotion. And from that moment, I was like, I've got to get this. My life literally depends on this messaging. And it was just this powerful moment. I see you smiling.
I just love these stories because it's that sense of hope that, like, I'm gonna get emotional, that like there are people out here that don't experience that.
Yeah.
And I know this is gonna be a little off topic. I'm tired of burying people.
Yeah.
And when we are in the darkness and we're unable to see the light, and then we finally get to the light, it's just a beautiful experience that, like, I wish a lot more people were able to experience.
Yeah. It truly is like being in the light, isn't it? Because it is the darkness. And yeah, I agree.
Had you had any experience in like 12-step rooms or around sober people prior to?
So, yes and no. I first got introduced to meth, and I had a meth problem all the way back when I was 19, 20. That was in like 97. And my parents had to come down and take me out of San Diego. They put me into a treatment center. I just wasn't even ready. There was nothing about that was me. And so, but I did stop using meth. I was sober I went back to Santa Barbara. That's where I went back to City College and got my BA. And then I went to
You're from the 805.
Yeah. What?
We're both from
We're
the
both
805.
from the 805.
Oh, good evening. Yes, good evening.
Yeah.
So I went to UCSB, and that's where I got sober. But I was drinking and smoking weed. But
Did you live on IV?
We lived. I lived in Goleta, not in IV.
My
though.
first heroin dealer was in Goleta.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think that would be a great drag name.
What was that?
Goleta.
Goleta, yeah.
it's
And her
Galena.
sister Glendora.
Santa Barbara's incredible, but so no, that was so I did go to some meetings, but it was more things like I had a DUI in 2021, and so I had to go to meetings for that, but nothing clicked, right? But it wasn't until I got sober and went to Palm Springs that I started to go to meetings. Scott also interjected me into the center of the boat, right? So like, this is who you need to know. I was going to multiple meetings a day. They told me to stay in sober living for 6 months, and I did, even though I hated it. I feel like sober living is such an important part of recovery, and I think that people often overlook this because
All the time.
there is
All the time.
something there is something that is so powerful once you're out of treatment to not be injected back into your own environment.
Absolutely.
And for me, that was a place where I could take I felt like I was a doe that was like just born. I was still kind of struggling to walk, and to be in a sober living environment was a place for me to practice new skills and to do so in a very safe place.
Say the magic of sober living is we as addicts and alcoholics, we are defiant people, right? And so there's something about turning your will and your life over and just saying, you know what? I'm going to raise my hands. I'm going to just give this 100%. I'm going to show up when I'm told to show up. I'm going to start to make my bed every morning. I'm going to get some consistency in my schedule with chores. I'm going to learn how to handle conflict resolution in a way with people that like I'm living with people. Everybody's on the same journey. We're going to go to meetings together on a Friday night. On Saturday night, they're going to not put down the toilet seat and it's going to drive me crazy. But I'm on the right path. So I'm going to learn how to say, hey, it really bothers me when you leave the toilet seat up. I'm just using this as an example. And we start to get this healthy conflict resolution. We learn how to advocate for ourselves. We have consistency in our schedule. We have people that we can like eat with and go to the movies with and come home to and share about our day. And we can say, you know what? I had a really tough conversation with my mom today. It made me feel this way. And if sober living is for me, it saved my life. If I didn't have sober living as an option, I would have never stayed sober.
I believe that's true for me too. Yeah, I was in sober living for just over 2 years.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like I really, I needed to be there. Like, because you were saying, as I was listening, as you were sharing about like using because of the community aspect and wanting to be a part of and wanting to belong. And I think that is something that we need in recovery as well, especially when you've been kind of on the fringes of society for so long, in isolation and moving from place to place where no one really gets to know you in those situations, right? It's like I show up, I'm here for a couple days, I, present this image of who I want you to think I am, use all your drugs, leave. So the transitional living, the sober living, I think provides that solid foundation that we talk a lot about in recovery.
And the community piece.
100%.
It's like y'all are all getting sober together at 10 o'clock at night. You all take your Seroquel together. You all, get your munchies together.
Right, the Quilter Beast.
You watch Drag Race or, whatever y'all watch. And you're like, all right, let's go to bed.
I mean, I didn't have friends I didn't know what a friend was. I didn't know how to be a friend. I didn't know how to accept like friendship or any type of closeness in any sort of relationship. And being in sober living, actually, that was where I learned how to do that.
There's also a piece where and I recognize not everybody has this situation. People have children in their addiction. People have jobs that support families in their addiction and don't have the opportunity to put all their stuff in storage and get rid of their apartment and all that stuff. But that action that you took in sort of closing the door on that chapter of your life that was so energetically charged with your addiction there is so much truth, and the only thing that has to change is everything.
Yep.
And I know times where
Can you say that again, just so we can turn that into a clip?
The only thing that has to change is everything.
Yeah.
Truly. I mean, there are so many times. It took me 7 years to get sober. I also, relate a lot to what we talked a little bit about earlier with returning to 12-step. But there are times where I think back where I'm like, from the outside, I was saying all the right things, but I was planting seeds and planning my relapse all along the way, making sure that parts of my old life were still in place. I would write my drug dealer's phone number down on a Post-it and put it in the back of my moleskin and then delete it from my phone. You know what I mean? Like you took that action this time around that is like, I'm really saying yes to a new experience.
I was told in my treatment center early on, you have to find the thing that's the thing that's the thing that might be the thing that could be the thing that might lead you to your next use. And I took that to heart. I got rid of my car that I'd been driving, the car, I had when I was in treatment, I had asked my dad if he could sell that, and we got a used car, and all of that you just said, right? We have to change everything. Take all of those numbers out of your phone, like you said, and really be willing to change everything. Yeah.
And one of the negotiations that we hear when we're talking about this is usually.
Oh yeah.
Right. Oh my God.
I'll put down everything. I'll delete all the numbers, but
so when I
that.
was in treatment, I was like 2 days about. It was about 2 days that I was going to get released, right? And I had been asking them, I'm like, how do you guys know if I'm ready? I'm not sure if I'm ready. Like, are you sure I'm ready? Like, and I started to talk to my therapist at the time about the apps, and I was like, hey, I think I'm going to put on my on Scruff or BBRT that I don't use drugs. She goes, what's that? And I'm like, BBRT? You don't know what Scruff is? Adam for app? No?
Oh.
All right, well, I'm going to do another oink oink.
Yeah. What is this? And I was like, oh, it's the place where you meet men and you're able to have. And she's like, you need to get off of those. You need to get off. And I remember that was like, my mind was like what? Get off of those apps. Like, I remember that was just the most like, what? I can't even imagine. Like, what is life not being on those apps? I was off those apps for 2 years. And that was so important for me to just not to be focused on my meetings and my fellowship and to not be on those apps for the first 2 years. You said earlier about community. I always say that I turn, I used to walk in with my backpack, and people appreciated me for what was in my backpack, right? And what was, in my jeans, and I feel like when I got to Palm Springs, I turned in my backpack for a big book. Going to meetings, people appreciate you and love you because of who you are, your integrity, your honor, how you show up. Like, you're able to start to build esteem because people look at you with love in their eyes, and you start to learn how to be loved. And then you start to see I started to see that I am lovable. And I think one of the things early in recovery too, that really helped me was I kind of operationalized my addiction, right? My addiction is telling me that nobody wants to be friends with me. My addiction's telling me that nobody, I'm a loser, I'm dorky, I'm silly looking, I walk funny, I talk funny, I'm too flamboyant, this, that, everything. My addiction wants me to think that I am a piece of shit. So I started to say, whenever those thoughts and feelings came up, because they were many, I would say, nope, that is not how I'm thinking anymore. And I would do the opposite. I would walk right up to the guys at the gym. I'd walk right into the middle of the group at the meetings. I would put my hand out and introduce myself to somebody that I didn't know. I'm shy, and that was really hard for me, but it was so important that I did that, because I was telling that voice inside of me that wants me to die, nah, we're not going to do this. We're not doing it.
And that contrary action, it gets so challenging sometimes, right? Like, especially for, I talk a lot about transactional relationships, which is the only thing that I knew how to have when I came into the rooms. And I only knew people by their shoes for the first 30 days when I got sober, because I couldn't look people in their eyes. Wow. I could not make eye contact with anyone. And there is a lot of power for me. And actually the topic that we want to talk about today is newcomers raising their hands, right?
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of power with me with having a little bit of time walking up to someone and sticking out my hand and saying, "Hey, I'm Paulo, welcome." It's so good to see you. Hey, let's grab, let's go get some coffee. Let's go get a donut. Let's chit chat, and people that did that for me, my first thought was, when I first got sober, was that they either wanted to sleep with me or that, whatever. And obviously there are those people in the rooms that do kind of like have that approach, but for those of us that like just want to welcome the newcomer and make people feel loved and welcome, and there's a lot of power in that, because CMA in Los Angeles is primarily gay men, and for gay men that have issues with gay men, it's challenging to walk into a place and be vulnerable and not be looking around the room the whole time somebody's speaking or try, it's tough to navigate. But one of the things that I think we wanted to talk about on this episode is coming back.
Coming back, So as a psychologist, years later now, I'm coming up on, I'll be 10 years, or 10, I had 9 years in September. I'm not going to say I'll be 10 because that hasn't happened yet. But as working with people who are in recovery, as we talked about, especially with chronic returnees or people who are coming back, there's this notion that they are being looked down upon, or there's a hierarchy, or they've lost something that they can't return, they can't get back. And so in this concept of like how counting days really is important. We need to count days in our program. It's an abstinence-based program. We want to show that it works, and there's value to counting days. That also has the impact of keeping people out sometimes, because they're afraid to come in and raise their hand and go through that shame of identifying again as a newcomer.
Right.
And and how do we address that? Like, how do we continue to foster that safety and that openness? It takes so much courage to come back. It doesn't take any courage to go out. But so much courage to come back.
One of the words that you used was chronic, and I want to go over to Mell. Why is meth use so prone to relapse? Like, why is it this drug specifically that has this lore, which like, it's just, I don't know. I just feel like I see it more with crystal meth than I do for alcohol or other substances. Like, what is the draw to it to make it like this chronic kind of relapsing?
Well, I think it's the impact, right, on a spiritual and physiological basis. Meth is going to disrupt the region in the brain that controls impulse, right? So and your visual memory, visual triggers, sensory triggers are going to be at an all-time high in your first 6 months.
By visual and sensory, you mean
what I'm
algorithms
remembering
and
about
phones?
maybe a past using session, what I'm fantasizing about, who is hitting me up, especially if you're on apps. That's going to be very difficult, right? Because even hear that sound, I've had people in meetings hear someone else's notification go off, reminds them of something that they did. Euphoric recall hits, craving hits, and they're gone because they have no impulse control, right? So like my sensory information is going to be really high in the first 6 months. And then I have really low impulse control. So it affects not only the person or, the addict on a physiological and psychological basis, but also a spiritual basis. Because for a lot of folks like chemsex, there's so much stigma and shame and oppression around sex and sexuality, especially in the queer community. And then you have the complexity of using, feeling bad about using, that amplifies shame, that then in turn hits all of these internalized beliefs about who you are as a sexual human. I really was listening when you said, like, it is an equalizer, right? Like, I can walk in and be anybody. I don't have to worry about feeling insecure, trying to fit in, or, try and be something that I'm not. I can actually just walk into this situation. It kills shame. It's a shame killer. And for people that struggle with internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia, minority stress. Like, I've got all these oppressive factors that just contribute to shame I may already feel about myself. And then I find a place and a space where that's eradicated for a day, a couple of days. The allure is really high. It's really enticing for a lot of people. So I think the chronic relapse is, I mean, there's so many different facets, right?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you because I know your substance of choice was not methamphetamine. So was that?
Well, I'm a recovering heroin fentanyl addict. So I talk a lot about, and I work predominantly with chemsex addicts, transgender women, and gay men who struggle with methamphetamine addiction. With my heroin addiction, I spent 51% of my life sick and 49% of my life loaded, right? That 51% of my life where I was dope sick is really, it's a physiological, you feel illness, right? Methamphetamine, certainly you're exhausted, you're lethargic, there's that withdrawal impact, but there isn't that immediate, you get dope sick after using fentanyl after like 6 hours. You need a hit every 6 hours.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of my recovery, that fear of feeling that feeling, of feeling sick, of kicking again, of getting restless legs and yawning and sneezing and not being able to sleep was enough to keep me sober for quite some time. And with meth, that's really, there isn't that. It's once the psychosis lifts, once you're starting to sleep again, maybe you've put on a little bit of weight and you're starting to feel good in your body again.
Feeling better.
It's a lot easier to think, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I can handle it this time.
That euphoric recall.
I don't have a drug problem. I have a money problem. I don't have a drug problem. I have a boy problem. You know, I think when we think about judgment and coming back into the rooms, it took me 7 years to get sober. So I was in the same space in Los Angeles a lot of the time. I was returning to the same fellowship that I left, right? And there was a lot of shame going back into these rooms, both self-imposed, but I can honestly say I felt judgment from people. I felt this sort of like, why can't this kid fucking get it? You know, he's saying all the right things. He seems smart enough. Why isn't he getting it? And though the 12 steps is the disease model, right? The majority of the way our society thinks about addiction is the moralist model.
Yes.
Right.
Because most of the way that drugs are talked about is within the justice system, which is the moralist model. You use drugs, it is a moral failing. It is a flaw in your character. You are choosing this. And it's really hard, even if you're in 12 steps, it's really hard to divorce yourself of that kind of thinking, especially when somebody has so much to lose, right? I've seen people go out who have just got their kids back with Child Protective Services, or just got out of a court case that could have sent them to jail for 15 years, and they go out. It's like, there's no other explanation outside of it has to be a disease. If it's not a disease, I will drive myself crazy, wondering how could somebody choose that over their children.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
You work a lot with the trans population, which, you know, we also do it at No Matter What Recovery. And to be honest, there's not enough of us. And one of the episodes we were talking about like survival sex work and how that related into their drug use. And so, and I think for me getting sober, there was like this lifestyle, like I wasn't just getting sober, I was switching my lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so do you find with the people or the patients that you work with that like, not only are they getting sober from a substance, they are changing their lifestyle and like what is that?
Absolutely. I think all of these, I think methamphetamines, you know, it's so tied to how we have sex, it's the culture and the community and the ritual and the connection. There's so many different things that trigger for methamphetamine that definitely people have to change their life. As you said earlier, nothing changes, everything changes or nothing changes, right? So I think that's back to sober living. That's why it's so important for, I think, people to do sober living, because it allows, you to become that seed again, right? That tiny little mustard seed that can grow completely anew and be nourished by recovery, by 12-step, essentially brainwashed. Okay, yeah, you need to be, I needed to be brainwashed. I needed a new way of living. These 12 steps for me were a recipe for elegant living. It's like, oh, I was, and I never felt like I was an adult before. Like I had a hard time with this adulting. Like people going to jobs and doing that whole 9-to-5 thing. Like I just couldn't get it. And I feel like for me, recovery and the 12 steps, you know, I had a family that loved me. I had an education. I had, a desire to do good in the world. But all of these things were in silos. And for me, recovery and the 12 steps, it's like the Transformers, right? The bus and the jetliner and the semi-truck come together in a perfect way finally, where each of them builds on the next, and we finally become the person that we were meant to become. And our spiritual condition is fed by the program. It's fed by the people that we surround ourselves with. It's fed by our meetings. And that spiritual condition, I think, it's the only thing. We only have our spiritual condition to keep us from that next use, right? We don't have a sponsor with us. We don't have a friend with us. We don't have anybody with us except for ourselves when there's a meth pipe in front of us or a drink or whatever. And so that's what we have to really continue on a daily basis to strengthen.
How do we make people feel welcome when they come back?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I think that I think all of us that are in meetings I think we need to take a moment and really look at for ourselves. So what are our preconceived biases around people who are returning? To what degree are those biases positive, negative? Are they valid? To the degree to which a negative bias is present, how are we, each and all of us, willing to address that? That starts with us. It starts with me. And then, when I'm, as a psychologist, and I'm working with somebody that's struggling with coming back and they're feeling a lot of shame, it doesn't necessarily help them for me to tell them what they're perceiving is incorrect. Even though I know that there's a lot of love in the room, I can also understand what that would feel like. And I think that I think that's a great question. And how do we?
For me, when my friends were relapsing in early sobriety, I would get jealous. And so I purposely had to separate myself from people that were going out more than I was, because it wasn't that I didn't care about them. It was the fact that and it was really hard for me to admit, there was some shame around the fact that as much as I wanted sobriety, there was a part of me that got jealous when somebody got to go get high. And came back.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah. I think also, in working with sponsees who are recycling through problem behavior coming back, whatever that might look like. In sharing my story, I am 6 years sober now. I can honestly say I had a better knowledge of the 12 steps. I was more connected to my spiritual path, more connected to service, more excited about recovery in my first 90 days than I am today. There is something where the newcomer is so excited about this new way of life, even though it was my 100th time being a newcomer, which is why it's impossible for me to, when people say, well, what's different this time? I can't tell you. I don't know.
Oh, that's something.
That's such a patronizing
it's
question.
like, what are you going to do different? I'm I ask bigger questions. Like, how do you want to be different in the world? Not what are you going to do? Because a lot of people do this box check recovery of I'm checking the boxes and I'm doing what I'm supposed to.
90
but they're
and
not
90
aligned
check.
with their own sense of spirit. And in my experience, that is the thing. And that is the way out. Whatever you value, whatever is meaningful to you, what are you passionate about? What gives you a sense of purpose? And rather than, going into a room again, and I've seen this many times, and having 1,000 people come up to you and well, what's going to be different this time? It seems very patronizing. It doesn't seem inclusive. And, one thing that I will always remember, and this actually got me back to another meeting, at a time in my sobriety where I was a little shaky. Someone remembered my name.
Oh, wow.
And I will never forget, because it's almost like I crossed a threshold, because I walked into this meeting, I was almost done with sobriety. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And one person remembered my name. Mel, how you doing? And that changed everything. And it kept me going back into meetings. So I think that there's a way that we can love on people and not be patronizing and not ask the same question that 1,000 other people are asking, but just to sit with somebody. Be like, how are you? Like, you want to,
And just make that connection, right? Like,
Yes.
We go to meetings, for our own recovery, but we also go to meetings so there's a place for people to go to meetings.
That's right.
Yeah.
I guess if you could say anything to the newcomer now, while we're sort of considering ways in which we could rectify this feeling of judgment, this feeling of shame, both self-imposed and other, sort of end on something, like, what would you say to that newcomer?
I would say that your feelings are valid. Absolutely. There's that people definitely treat newcomers differently as a blanket statement. I would also encourage people to see kind of what you just said, that sometimes somebody that's relapsing can feel dangerous to some people. And so it's not coming from a place of not loving. It's not coming from a place of not caring. It's coming from a place of self-preservation, that there might be a perceived distance. And that coming back takes so much courage. And and the people that come back are the people that show us and help us to all understand how important and how precarious and how cunning, baffling, and powerful this drug is. And they are the ones that are out there on the front line. They're the most important people in this program. They keep the program alive. And so whether or not you're coming in for the first time or you're coming back, it's just, it is, you're the most important person in the room. You're not the least important.
Can I ask this question? Like, and this for everyone, like, I personally get very bothered when people say, oh, you're just on a pink cloud. Like, or people identify of like, oh, I'm just having a pink cloud. And I'm like, honey, you just stepped out of hell and into a room. And for the first time, probably in a long time, you are actually feeling connected, loved, and just good in being in the room. And then you have others, and this is where I'm very careful about inclusive language, that will say, oh, you're just on a pink cloud, and dismiss it and minimize it. But that is one of the most life-changing moments for a lot of people. Let them love that.
Or just say, welcome to the pink cloud,
Okay,
sis.
like,
Let's have a dance party on the cloud.
Let's help it last for as long as it can.
Let's lift that up and like stretch that out, because you're going to need it.
You're going to need it. Yeah. So to put you on the spot, if you've watched some of the podcasts, you know this question's coming up. We like to ask, and we'll end with this. What's your no matter what?
What's my no matter what?
Yeah.
I don't pick up or use no matter what. So for me, when there's no reservations, there's no something that can happen in the future. There's no, if the world would end tomorrow, there's no caveat that says I will do the thing or entertain the notion of the thing that could lead me back to the life. I've been given a gift that is so valuable and so precious that I will not pick up no matter what. And I'm very, very, very afraid, because I don't feel like I have this. I don't feel like I got this and it's easy. And I feel like every single day I need to make a commitment to my sobriety, because every day I have a chance of going out.
For sure.
And so absolutely, no matter what.
One of the things that I love that you say, how do you identify in a meeting when people are going around doing their
this
time?
Is kind of maybe been a little bit controversial. So, as a psychologist, I have clients that are in the rooms that I'm also working with. And so I get to see and experience how they struggle. And especially in meetings where we're identifying with time, introduce yourself, your addiction and your recovery time. Instead of saying my recovery time is 9 years, I will sometimes say my recovery time is now. And by doing that, I'm hoping that somebody that's in the rooms that isn't ready to like let everybody know that they've relapsed or whatever, you can identify in a meeting however you want. You absolutely can say your name. You can say your recovery time. You can not say you can say Billy Bob Thornton. You can say whatever you want as long as you're there. The only requirement is to have a desire
to stay sober.
So you don't have to. You just do it. Just identify how you want. You know. So.
All right. Well, Wes, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a great conversation. I love it.
Can't we go an hour?
Yeah, we can. You know what? Well, we're already planning for season 2, and maybe we'll come back with a different topic. And hopefully I get to see you in another beautiful chartreuse sweater.
Okay.
It's so good. I love it. All right. Well, we'll see y'all next week. Thanks for coming and viewing. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And also, if you have any questions or need any resources, please reach out to podcast@nomatterwhatrecovery.com. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.